What's going on, guys? It's Chris Toro. So before I start this video, I just want to preface something. So I've been a console and PC gamer for some time, and I've seen the growth of graphical power, software efficiency, to the point that I gradually got more into tech and PC gaming. I completely forgot how it was like to just turn on a console and play a game. But since the Switch's launch, I started remembering how just simply starting a game and turning on your console without worrying about any extra features could be like. So these are the reasons why I almost exclusively play my Nintendo Switch. So for starters, there are constant updates for both the console and PC platforms. Almost every other day when I go to turn on my PC or console, there's just bound to be an update waiting for me. Even if I want to do something as simple as watch Netflix, I usually have to do it on my PC because the console, if it needs an update, it won't go online. It'll prevent you from going online before you finish that update. And with PC, the way Windows gets you to update your system is sometimes they would tweak and turn off some features. Now, there's no real way of proving this, but I find every time there's an update that I postpone more than twice, there's either some kind of video or sound issue that I have to restart the computer to fix. Like recently, for some reason, my speakers just wouldn't work. They were disabled and couldn't be re-enabled. I went to all kinds of settings. It was like my speakers just didn't exist for some reason. And all I did was put my PC on sleep mode. So it was generally running the same software that it was since the last time I turned it on. So Windows can get really tricky with it and actually make it seem like there's something wrong with your PC when in turn all you need to do is update it. But that's the thing, I was forced to update it. There was no freedom involved. I tried to postpone it for weeks because I personally don't like Windows 10 and the way they marketed that software. No matter how good it may seem, I can go on and on about it, but I'll just move on. But with the Nintendo Switch, I find that it's so simple just to turn on the system and focus on your games. It's as if Nintendo is forcing you to focus on your video games, and that's something I haven't been presented with in a long time. I forgot how it was to be completely focused on one software and one software only. I actually put in more hours in the Switch than I've ever had with any console in the past 10 years. It's most likely because I got into the whole pattern of upgrading and looking forward to the next update, looking forward to a graphical update, mods, and aspects like that, to the point I wasn't focused on the game anymore, but I was just focused on how it looked and how it played. And especially with PC, depending on what kind of PC platform you have, what kind of processor you have, or graphics card, it could actually affect the game to the point that it just doesn't work at all. For an example, almost every one of Capcom's games on the PC has an issue. The original Devil May Cry 4 had a huge issue where it wasn't running on a lot of laptops, and Devil May Cry Special Edition still doesn't work for me. It crashes every 10 minutes. And I just recently got Resident Evil 4 to work, and that game came out so long ago. And with consoles, even though you're on one or two different types of systems, it's easier to run games on that specific console because there is only one or two types of that console. But I still find myself upgrading the console because the game files are getting enormous, to the point that I can only fit 5 to 10 games with my default hard drive. I usually have to replace the 500 gigabyte for a 2 terabyte, and 2 terabyte laptop hard drives don't really run you that much. But if you have poor internet speeds, then you're probably not going to play your game in a couple days, because games like Batman Arkham Knight are at least 70 gigabytes, and with all the patches and updates included, a game like GTA 5 could be 100 gigabytes. But not only that, games like Horizon Zero Dawn are humongous. It's as if the developers don't really care how much space you have left in your hard drive. If someone just wants to get the original PS4 with its original hard drive included, they're probably only going to be able to have 4 games at a time on their system and have to go online and re-download the games they want to play again. So it kind of tailors your wants and needs to play specific games, because along with playing that game comes the wait time and space on your hard drive to consider. It becomes an investment, and it's not only about a game anymore. It's about the fact if you want to upgrade your hard drive or not, or if you would still want to play it in the foreseeable future after that 50 gigabyte game downloads finally. It's an investment and a commitment to play games on modern consoles. But the Switch is compressing games constantly. They're compressing the textures and sometimes the menus just so the game could be at the most 12 gigabytes. There are some special cases like Resident Evil Revelations 2 that's 20 gigabytes because Capcom just doesn't know how to compress, I guess. But a few days ago, Outlast came out and that game was surprisingly only 5 gigabytes. I just used my SD card from my camcorder, which is a 128 gigabyte Sony card, and easily have enough space for 20 or even more games. It made everything simpler, lighter, and easier to manage, because if I need to download Outlast again, it's only 5 gigabytes. It takes around 30 minutes to download. And not only that, but you could buy games physical for the Switch, and most likely likely the entire game's going to be on that cartridge. And unlike the PS4 and Xbox One, you don't need to install 80% of the game in the system to play it. I still remember how annoyed I was when I bought the physical copy of Batman Arkham Knight, and I still had to install 50 gigabytes. Sure, it was a bit faster, but it still took up most of my hard drive. At that point, installing your game in your console renders the physical disc as an access key. The line between PC and console gaming is blurring to the point that it's almost not even there. When a physical disc acts like an access key, if you think about it, there's no real difference between PC and console games. That's why a lot of console gamers are just jumping to PC so they can fully customize what they want and put as much memory in it as possible. Because usually that's the first problem, the storage space. And this also harkens to the days when the Wii U came out. In a way, Nintendo was focusing on hardware a lot more than they usually do, to the point that the Wii U didn't really have a lot of killer app games, but they were still advertising the system itself with the Amiibo functionality. But since there were so many more substantial consoles with superior hardware, the Wii U just didn't seem that impressive to people. But with the Switch, I find that its advertisements focus a lot more on the games, and the fact that you can play it anywhere you want. It makes games its #1 priority, to the point that a game like Outlast could be ported within months. And don't get me wrong, even though the Switch is my go-to system, there's still room for improvement. The only thing it really needs, so I can be completely happy, is a Netflix and YouTube app. Besides those two things, if it remains exactly the way it is, I'll be fine with that. If a Switch 2.0 would come out in the next 5 years, that would kind of go against its solid simplicity. Upgrading hardware in the next 5 years would probably increase its chances of surviving, but also deviating from how simple they are now wouldn't make their chances any better. If they could just utilize software and upgrade the battery every now and then, the next 10 years could work out very well for them. But of course, it's not all about success, but the statement that Nintendo Switch has on the console market. Hopefully, instead of every console eventually becoming a hybrid, they just simplify a little more. I find that all of these graphical improvements and hardware requirements are just leading companies into spending a lot more money for something as simple as the aesthetic of a video game. And those aesthetics are leading them to make something like loot boxes and microtransactions just to even out the difference of their expenses. It only seems like a downward spiral to me, and something that consoles really never needed. Video games are to the point that they look more realistic and more absurd than reality itself. I'm not sure why they would need to improve at this point, when there could just be a different way of playing, and a more simple way of approaching what we already have. That's what consoles were in the first place, a simpler way to play something impressive. But now it just seems like a race between PC and consoles and even cell phones. Everything is upgrading to the point that people are spending way too much money and companies are spending too much to fund those hardware and software improvements. But me personally, I prefer to stay in the medium and to just have everything simplified and perfected before we escalate to another level of aesthetic. Every time somebody comes out with a technical marvel, there's always just as many problems with it. Mass Effect Andromeda shows how a company could be overwhelmed by all of the technical options we have today, and most impressive hardware doesn't always mean your product is going to be successful. And of course, it counts on the developer themselves. But if advancements are getting to the point that developers can only make half of the game and then sell the rest 6 months later, could these absurd advancements be hindering the overall presentation and vision of that product? It's easy to see how a company that was once so great can crumble under that pressure of all those advancements. Eventually, we're going to get up to the point where The Last of Us 3 is going to take 10 years to develop, and where we're only going to get 1/4 of the game and get the other 3 parts in DLC. And by award ceremonies and voting, I'm not exactly sure if consumers want a more realistic game in the first place, seeing how there was so much padding with a game like Batman, getting up to a point of absurdity with its tank gameplay, when back in the day, Arkham City was one of the best games in recent memory. Because it was working with systems like Xbox 360 and PS3, it could be more than obvious that this is just a downward spiral. Gameplay is most likely never going to change. 60 frames isn't very new to the gaming genre. Since Pokemon in the Game Boy Advance days, games have been running at 60 frames per second. So besides the fluidity of playing something, the only thing that's really changing is something as useless as the aesthetic of a game. If all it does is affect presentation and not gameplay, then what really is the excuse of making a video game look as realistic as a movie, opposed to promote it as if it were a movie, or appeal to people that like movies, when those kind of practices seems more out of a video game's element? It shouldn't be about the presentation or how much story you have in it. It should only be about how fun the game actually is, because turning on my systems and having a 20-minute update just just because the aesthetic of the game is getting in the way of the gameplay elements isn't fun in my opinion. It's only hindering my experience and not really motivating me to go back and finish the game. And of course we do need some kind of aesthetic to look at while playing it to be amazed, but there can be limits to that. There can be sacrifices made to simplify the process of making a successful and fun video game. But when aesthetics and hardware get in the way of that process, there might be a slight chance that the industry is losing its identity. And yes, I know all the statistics. I know that video games are grossing more than movies right now, but most of the time they're spending more to make that video game than most movie studios. And if this cycle continues, the cost to develop versus the sales demands is going to cause even more companies to hinder that product just to make more money, cutting the game in half or make some useless DLC to sell on the side to make some of those expenses back. Either way, if it doesn't change in the next 10 years, I'm going to stay at the same platform that I'm at now, and with the Game Awards showing how the only thing that matters is the way you present and how fun the gameplay is, with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild being Game of the Year. Hopefully other companies will see that, and it actually shows what most people want, and that's how it should be. It should be more about the game itself than how it looks, or the kind of marketing surrounding it, or the hardware that it's on. But of course, when we're playing something, these kind of topics can come as an afterthought. And for all those afterthoughts, those are the reasons why, for the next 10 years, I'm going to be gaming primarily on the Nintendo Switch. And yeah, I know Death Stranding is coming out for the PlayStation 4, but we've gotten 3 trailers so far, and haven't seen gameplay yet. That kind of precedent in itself should be frowned upon. The fact that presentation comes first before anything. It's been years since its announcement, and still no gameplay. Even for a quote-unquote masterful developer like Kojima, it's shameful to see where the gaming industry has gone. And who knows where The Last of Us Part 2 went, while games like Resident Evil slowly lose their way and then gain it back a little bit. Other developers like Red Barrel, the guys that developed Outlast, kind of know what it's really supposed to be about. And it's not all bad. There's still some silver linings. It's just become more obvious that the focus is most likely somewhere where it shouldn't be. So let me know what you guys think, and what console do you primarily game on? See you guys in the next video. Later.
Me singing from heartache, from the pain, taking my message from the veins, speaking my lesson from the brain, seeing the beauty through the